Altbays.
Kia ora, we're live. Altbays Show brought to you by Altbays.nz. This is show number 178. Can I have some claps? Thank you, Taylor. That was a very sharp... But here we are, live every Tuesday and Thursday at 7 p.m. Always bringing exciting people from all over Aotearoa, New Zealand to have a laid-back conversation about everything.
Yeah, boy.
Okay, so make sure to join our YouTube channel. You can subscribe to the channel. That's a great way to support the platform. You can also become a member. You throw some dollars there and support the team so we can carry on getting bigger and bringing more cool people on board. Okay, if you don't have time to watch the live stream, it's all good. The video stays on YouTube. Always. People ask me where to find the old videos because we do live streams. YouTube has a bar right at the top with some different sections, and the one that says live stores all the videos, okay? You have to explain that because sometimes people, they're not used to the platform. So you go right at the top, there are different sections, and the one that says live has all the guests that we've had so far, okay? We are also on all the leading audio platforms. So you will find us on Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio. Just search for Altbays and we'll be there. Our media group is also publishing this beautiful thing here. Look at this. Coromine, nice and fresh. The beautiful owl done by our dear friend Emma Evangeline Gustafsson. Look at this amazing artwork. It's so beautiful. So the idea is that we bring local artists to the cover of the magazine every month, and we invite beautiful people from the Coromando to share their thoughts and talk about cool topics, and cool people as well, of course. So if you would like to write, or if you are an artist and you would like to see your artwork, if you would like to illustrate some of the pieces that we have in the magazine, we would love to hear from you. hello@coromine.nz, or you can even message Altbays, and I just change my hat and then I answer you as Coromine. So it would be lovely to hear from you if you want to be in our magazine. And if you want to advertise in the magazine, who do we have here today? We have Barrier Air, we have CFM, we got some beautiful people, Guthrie Barrow. I'm not going to say all the names, but I will say that on every show. We got Chops, gardening, landscaping. We got pretty cool. Oh, so dope. Hemp products. The future, my friend. The past and the future. Funny enough, eh? The past and the future. On my left, I have the pleasure to have my dear friend Mark Troop back. How are you, Mark?
Kia ora, bro. I'm very good. I've been trying to catch up with you at the cafe, but you've never met in Hulu when I've been there. So I've actually had to come along tonight just to talk to you and Taylor.
Much easier,
and
isn't it?
Elvisa, of course, yeah.
So we can have some foods together.
Yeah, we had the nice, beautiful food from Blue Ginger. My God, it was so good. Oh, man. And it's so good to see you all. And even Sushi over there. I shouldn't say it too loud. She might come running. It's a friendly dog in the studio. But
Mark, when you came as a guest, I think that was like right at the beginning, eh? Maybe like number 6, or was that right?
A little bit later, maybe, but very early, yeah.
I'm trying to remember. Taylor can check that for us. That was one of the first shows that we had. And that was before one of your last trips to India.
Yeah.
How was that, man? How was the trip?
India is very hard to explain. It's for the people who know the psychedelic era. It's like taking acid and being in this amazing movie, and it's just another world, and it's so cool to discover that there is another reality. You know, our culture is not the only reality in the world, and it just increases your love for people. For me, that's the thing. Once you realise you're part of the whole, then you don't feel separate, and then you're not going to go and steal off your neighbour and drive your car into someone's shop because you're part of the whole. And I don't blame those people who feel separate, because we live in a society that's pushing that. So it makes sure, we go to this beautiful place and meet beautiful people that have a totally different viewpoint, and you go, wow, this is so cool. This is so cool.
And huge, eh? Like what a big country, like
Yeah.
population-wise, right?
Yeah, it's like a sense overload at times. But once you learn to relax, it's okay. When you first hit there, it can freak you out, but you've got to just relax and go with it and smell the air and see the colours and hear the chanting of the monks when you walk through a forest. It's another world. It's our other home for me and my wife Leah. It's our other home.
It feels like you always like refreshed. You always feeling new when you come back from India.
Yeah, to tell you the truth, it's hard to come back. We feel sad when we leave. I love all you people here, and it's nice to see you. It helps me come back. But for us, it's hard to leave. Very hard,
Are you planning to go back?
Very shortly. Only a few weeks now and we're going, so it was really cool to be able to fit in this conversation before we go. But another 6 months we're gone, that's it. For 6 months we're gone, in about, May 15th we go. So we're all set. Yeah.
I'm glad you're here today.
Yeah.
Tonight.
Cool,
Thank
brother.
you.
Cool, brother.
We have the pleasure to have Elvisa van der Leden as a guest tonight. How are you, Elvisa?
Kia ora, I'm good, thanks. Yeah, feeling a little bit nervous, but I am with anything that I've done for the first time, as you can imagine. Most people are like that.
Yeah, I am.
So yeah, but thanks for having me. It's really nice to meet all these new people, and I'm excited to talk about stuff.
Yeah, so you are new to the Coromandel community, right?
Yeah, well, my husband went to Mercury Bay in his high school years, and so we've got some old school friends who are still based here and really involved in the community. So we've been sort of visiting for the last 10 years, really, the two of us. My mother-in-law and her husband have had their house in Whenua Kite, which we've moved into with them, and our 6-month-old baby, Rawari. They've had that place for 17 years. Wow. So they've only just sort of started working on it and really making it a home, like to retire in. And yeah, it's really nice to be able to help them out with that as with intergenerational living. Young people come in, help the older ones with some more physical stuff, and then the grandparents love helping with the babies. So yeah, everyone wins.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for doing this. Thanks so much for joining us. Before we start, I just want to say thank you very much to Blue Ginger. They brought us amazing kai. So as we always do, I posted a story on our Instagram, tagging them and showing the dinner that we had. That was good, guys. God. Good stuff.
That was so good.
It was delicious.
Yeah.
Delicious. So shout out to Blue Ginger. If you are coming to the Coromandel, which you should, because it's the best place to be, make sure to check them out, blueginger.co.nz, and we're going to have them on the screen. They are on the social medias, of course, so check them out. Beautiful Thai fusion restaurant. Amazing Kai. Thanks, Bex. Thanks, the team, Blue Ginger team, always feeding us and making us happy. So let's do this. Elvisa is a conservationist. I was practicing this word in the afternoon.
Well done.
Elvisa is a conservationist, artist, and new mom working towards a better future for her mokopuna. With a background in media and conservation, she has been an elected Taranaki Regional Councillor. That's cool. Founding trustee of Creative Taranaki, and worked for various grassroots environmental organizations as well as Department of Conservation. Doc. Elvisa is super passionate about people and environment and has hope that we all learn the importance of being a better ancestor. And I added peace to that.
Thanks.
Elvisa, I every time that I share the link of our live stream, I like to put like a question or a comment to get people engaged, like to start a conversation. And I was thinking today I put, how do we get young people to engage with politics?
That is a really good question, and something that I missed out on adding to like my little bio thing, because I just like getting involved in lots of different things, and not only sort of helping get things off the ground and get momentum with things moving, but I love sort of exploring areas that I'm not an expert in. Yeah. So you talk about youth. When I became a Taranaki Regional Councillor, I was the only new regional councillor that was elected that term, and unfortunately I wasn't re-elected last term, but that opened up different doors for me, so it's all worked out fine. for me. But now there's no one under 40 on the regional council, and there's no one with like specifically with an environmental science background on the regional council. Yeah. So that's kind of where I feel like the community missed out. But there's 4 women rather than 2 now on the council. So there is
it's a plus.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There is positive change. But in terms of youth, it really got me thinking about how do we get young people voting and engaged and interested in politics. There are definitely kids in the community who are like, they want to be politicians. Yeah. And I know this because I started a small group called Taranaki Youth Voice, and it was sort of... sorry, my S's are really whistly.
No, it sounds right to me.
Okay. It sort of started with a friend of mine, CBJ. They are really passionate about politics because of where they come from, a small town in Stratford. They actually stood for council as well, but they're a bit younger than me. And they were involved in the Stratford Youth Council at one stage. Amazing, really intelligent person who helped me get this group, Taranaki Youth Voice, off the ground and engaged with all these young people. And starting in New Plymouth, but it kind of expanded a little bit more when our Labour MP, Glenn Bennett, back in New Plymouth, sort of reached out and started a youth, I can't remember the name of it, but it was like, youth MP program through Parliament. And so they get a group of youth MPs that are selected after they do some speeches and things. And then they get sent to have a look around Parliament and learn about how everything works and how the system works. And so there are programs that do exist, but they are often targeted or like get the attention of young people who are already involved and interested. Yes. Yeah. So the problem is, how do we get the rest, which are like 90% of the youth? And there's a campaign that is going around to campaign for the voting age to drop to 16. Yep. And it's quite polarising as new ideas usually are in the early stages, especially when people aren't aware of like where it might have worked before. So in places like Scotland, they dropped the voting age to 16, and research and reports have shown that young people of those voting ages are more engaged with politics, talking about politics at the dinner table, for instance, with their families, and they kind of learn together about the system and sort of bounce ideas and share experiences that are politically like related to political issues.
Do you think New Zealand is there though? Do you think that those topics come to the table of like the everyday Kiwi?
I think a lot of young people don't realise just how much they already know about politics. We live in the era of social media, like kids are exposed, young people are exposed to experiences, cultures, realities from the other side of the world.
That's true. It's true.
More so than they have been in previous generations. And so I think a lot of the time we underestimate their capacity to understand, to want to learn, to be able to make decisions for themselves. And, there's that bubble wrap theory, right? If you're going to bubble wrap your baby, they're not going to learn anything. Yeah. Well, we do that politically as well. We want our young people to be children. So it's like, which one do you want? So it's about finding that balance. But part of that balance is allowing them to explore, and people's ideas and ideologies change over time as well. So a lot of people, even right up until adulthood now, even adults today, they are loyalist political voters because of their parents, of what their parents told them. Now, there's a gap between when you go to high school to when you're old enough to really understand how politics impacts your life personally. When you leave school and you either go get a job or you go to university, unless you're studying politics or something related to that, you're kind of in a state of like, how do I fit in society? Who am I? You're discovering who you are really as an adult and who you are going to become. And so there's this gap of like survival and identity that you're exploring without the context, the political context of where that lies and why it's important to vote on things like that. And so if you at least have the context and this is my personal view.
Yeah.
If you have the context and some sort of political education, you're probably better prepared for engaging with the system once you become 18 and you're navigating that world as an adult because you have some context and you have some experience in it. Whereas a lot of people, when they turn 18, they don't start voting until they're like a little bit older.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you guys feel like the educational system is supporting that by giving good information and preparing voters and people who like to be part of this?
One of the things that worries me is I haven't been to university, but I talk to university people that study, and it seems to be a place for conditioning, as everything is in life. It's not necessarily negative. But are they teaching the radical view? Probably not. That there's no criticism of capitalism by capitalists. It's only by Marxists and that those sort of people. They've looked at it, and so it's good for people to be involved. But is there the radical view as well? Do they study Malcolm X or Karl Marx and not just looking at it a little bit, but looking in depth at it and saying, this is a system we live under, but it's not necessarily the only system, because I see it's. A lot of people talk. I've talked to older people than me. I'm getting old, and they think democracy is voting, and it's not. It's not, because your politicians get up and lie and tell you what you want to hear. We've seen it so often in New Zealand. The TPP thing was a classic example, and I actually voted Labour last time, and I probably wouldn't ever again in lots of ways, because they just lied and pushed it through and gave power to the corporates to control our country. And do people know that? And that's the problem with, it's really cool, you go to Parliament, see how things are happening, but someone has to step up and go, but this is only one way of looking at life. There's other ways, and I think you can see it with marriedom in New Zealand, like the radicals sort of get pushed aside and sort of mocked in lots of ways, I'm just wondering what you sort of think of that from a person who's quite educated, but also an open-minded person, I can see.
Well, I try to be open-minded, but I have my biases just like everybody
we all
else.
Do the same.
Yeah. You covered a few different things there. In terms of the ideological spectrum, every faction of that has its nuances. Yeah. And I think it's important that when you are discussing ideologies, politics, that sort of stuff, you are aware of the nuances, even if you're not aware what they are.
Yeah.
And that's part of that open-mindedness in those discussions. Yeah. So that's one part of that.
What I'm talking about is critical thinking.
Yeah.
I see less and less. I don't want to talk too much myself. We're here to hear from you, but I see
we're chatting.
Less and less space for critical thinking, and people almost incapable of it. Like you said, they vote for what their parents said.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
it's
because you're an activist as well. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, I was explaining, like, I'm an activist at heart.
Yeah.
But I'm a diplomat in mind.
Very well
so
said,
the way that and I believe that everybody on that political spectrum plays a role in the system, because we're all, I don't want to say slaves to the system.
We're part of society.
We're part of society, and society has rules, and society has cultures, and we're all part of something within that.
Yeah.
So it's very complex, and that's what I try to keep in mind and contextualize things when I am having these conversations. And I am Filipino-Irish, married to a Dutch Māori. My mum is I'm first generation Kiwi. My mum's from the Philippines, so I have a very multicultural lens on the
mix.
way. And so when I was going through university and just sort of traveling around, studying different things, and I've had lots of different jobs, because my mum brought me up to be really financially independent, because she doesn't have intergenerational wealth to hold down to me in terms of she's given me a whole bunch of other wealth, but I have that awareness that I don't hold it against my mum or her family in the Philippines that they can't help me buy a house or anything like that, and everyone has a different background and different stories to how they got to where they are. I don't know where I was going with that, but my point was the multicultural lens, and that really shapes how people engage with the world and with each other. And being from I had a very strict upbringing, which helped me learn discipline and being okay with being alone, like we were talking about earlier before this conversation. And so I have a lot of different types of skills that have helped me get through life and succeed in certain areas, whereas someone who's had it really easy in life may not understand why discipline is important, or like, you know, everyone's got different skills, priorities, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
I want to bring something up. Nowadays, it's very common, and you can talk about mental health from many different ways, you know, like, but it's such a hot topic, you know, like everybody's like, oh, my mental health, looking after, like, you know, and in one way, I think it's fantastic, because in the past, you would not understand sometimes what was going on. So a label can be very complicated, but sometimes it does help. You know, sometimes it's all you need is some, you know. But I can see both ways. But that was not even my point. The thing what you said about being Filipino and not having that thing, oh, you know that the family is all right and we'll back you up. Like, we're hustling, right? So my reality is quite similar. I'm doing the exercise of acknowledging my privilege. So like, we were never a rich family in Brazil, but my parents could afford education for me, and that was gold. But like, now that I'm an adult, I remember seeing them working non-stop, so we didn't have much time together because they were giving their lives so I could have something. And now I understand that very well, right? So I'm here. So they paid for drumming classes and English classes, and here I am teaching drums and speaking English, right? So I'm very grateful for that, and I'm so like, I'm doing this exercise of like, you know, it's easy for me to complain about things because people around me have much more when it comes to material stuff. But then here's the catch: a lot of my friends have families, and I see them on, and I'm not judging them, because it's actually funny sometimes. Like, they freak out because like everything has to be perfect, and they have to make sure that they're gonna have everything they need for the children. So like, and then I see my parents times 10, you know, like in the coolest country in the world that will back you up, that has benefits, that has like good lifestyle. Of course, if you're a Kiwi, you will complain that you're not Swedish or whatever. But like, you know, like, so then I see the wave of mental health being so, you know, like just different lenses of a thing. I'm like, I look at them and I'm like, you're fine, bro. Like, you're all good. Like, I have no idea what the word savings means. Like, when I tell people that everything that you're looking at, you guys, like this studio, this magazine, when I say that almost 100% of it's coming from Taylor's and my pocket. People laugh. We had people coming here and laughing. They were like, how much are you guys making? And I'm like, we're paying, bro. We're paying to do this stuff. We're paying to put a magazine out. We're paying to put a podcast out. They just don't understand. And I just wanted to link these things with the thing with politicians, because what I find with the older people in politics is like, they have this sense of control when you're older, a lot of them, like, because, and I want to ask you that's where I want to go with this. Like, you dealt with older people. Did you feel like they had a sense of like, because I'm a politician and because I'm here, like I'm having control of the situation, and then they go home and cry in the corner?
I don't know about crying in the corner.
Sorry, I just needed a twist. I just needed
we need to make this political discussion really interesting. Yeah, I mean, that is a good point, because a lot of politicians, they got into politics. Not all politicians, but a lot of politicians got into politics because they had the time and money to campaign. You know, standing for a political role, you know, as a politician, standing for board, local government, for parliament, central government, you have to have time and money to be able to do that. And the only reason I was able to stand for local government was because I had a little bit of savings left over from whatever I was saving for. And I had the flexibility in my day because I was a contractor. I was an environmental educator at the time. And because I was an environmental educator, I was working with schools, and I had I had parents coming to me while I was campaigning and saying, we're going to vote for you because my child pointed at your poster on the fence and said, that's our penguin lady. She teaches us about, how to protect penguins in the environment. And so, that message hit the parents and was like, she'd make a great environmental leader, and the regional council is the environmental regulator. So, sort of people joined the dots and voted for me, and I got in on my first go, which was like quite a privilege and an honour. But in terms of working with people who have been in politics for a long time, most of them I feel really are passionate about the community, but it's usually their community. And I think for some, and that includes me, because I'm passionate about the environmental community and how our actions affect the wider community through the environment. So for instance, you think of a stream, someone owns a piece of land upstream, what they do in and around that environment affects someone further downstream, kind of thing. That's a really simple way of putting it, but it's a lot more complex. Yeah. Anyway, same with like sources of food. People, sometimes want to go, like hunting, for instance, whatever politicians or conservationists lobby for or apply rules-wise onto certain pieces of land affect the people who use that land, whether they're farmers or hunters or conservationists or environmental educators. It's a very complex ecosystem. And what I found was that most of people would ask me, oh, what's it like being part of the old boys club? And I was like,
White, you forgot white.
White, yeah. I feel weird saying that because, but it is true.
Behave yourself, man.
It is true that we had 11 councillors on the Taranaki Regional Council. I was one of 2 women. Yeah. I was the only non-Pākehā except for the chair, who was Māori, and he's now standing for the National Party for New Plymouth. And he did he did a lot of good work as chair for the regional council, and so did the other councillors. And our current chair, Charlotte Littlewood, I say our, I'm not there anymore. Shout out to my Taranaki family. She's done some really great work too, and she comes from a different background than I come from, but I brought a lot to the table that educated some of the other councillors from a youth perspective, from a sort of less privileged. I have my privileges, but it's less privileged than some of the other councillors. The only one renting, for instance, you know. Yeah. And at first I was like, oh, I don't pay rent, and then the other councillors were like, if you rent, you're paying rent. You're paying rates through your rent. Right, yeah. And my landlord lives in Australia. And our unit that we moved out of is now part of a family trust. Yeah. And they've just put the rent up for a 2-bedroom unit down a shared driveway up to $600 pretty much, $959. Yeah. But yeah, those sorts of things, they impact everybody. And if you're a homeowner or a property owner who owns multiple properties and you are not in the shoes of someone who is a renter whose rent keeps going up but is not investing in a home for the long term, then it's a conflict. It's like you're trying to, like you said, there's other worlds that people live in.
And they're probably not aware.
Yeah, no, it's an awareness thing. Yeah. A lot of the time they're insulated in their communities because they only engage with people who have the shared interests, perspectives.
Which is something we all do. You look at the Google figures, everyone looks at something that agrees with them.
Yeah. Like,
not everyone,
confirmation bias.
That's well said.
Yeah. So I have empathy for people of all sorts of backgrounds and generations, but I also feel there's a lot of disconnect. A lot of people are so concerned with conserving their own way of living that it's almost like really hard to change your perspective on other ways of living. Yeah. So when it comes to politics, it's even harder because you're actually, for a lot of like the central politics, they're either towing the party line, or they are, pressured by their peers, their colleagues. I've known a couple of people who are part of a political party as list MPs, and they're just like, it's toxic. Like it's they're just part of a system that's been boiling over for centuries.
I've always questioned myself the idea of the party line. because it's not democratic.
No, and it's changing all the time as well. Yeah. What I have found is that there are a couple of councillors that are older white men who come from the farming community, and I do not believe that all farmers are like this. And I think that I totally empathise with a lot of the changes that are going on that farmers are trying to keep up with, and it's a lot of stress for them.
Oh God, yes.
And a lot of the young people, normally farms would be passed down from generation to generation, and a lot of, from what I've heard, what I've been told by a few of the older farmers, is that their kids don't want to take over the farms. They want to go get a job in town, or they want to explore other options, which is fair enough. But it means that those older farmers don't have the family support that they the generations before them had. And I'm not speaking for all farmers. No. This is just from what I've heard from some of them, which has made me a little bit more empathetic towards them, and sort of made me realise the disconnect between generations, and also the changing environment of not only political but economic. There's different technologies bringing in new opportunities.
As Kiwis from different generations, do you guys fear the farming industry being the heartbeat, being the driver of New Zealand economy, and with so many changes happening? You just mentioned one example, but we're talking about environmental issues as well, that every day they become more like highlighted in the news. Like some stuff you can't argue. Even if you become a keyboard warrior and you argue as much as you can't change facts that the water is an issue. It doesn't matter how much you want to hold to your insecurity or whatever, like things are changing. And so what do you guys think about that? I'm just
it's something that for me is just, it's because I've worked on farms. I grew up on farms, and I know it's hard work, and so you have to be very careful. That's where I like your diplomatic approach. They're humans. The humans that are struggling, and some of them are well off, and some aren't. And also the industrial farmers that are starting to push more and more, which is something I don't agree with, but myself. But traditionally, it was a lifestyle. It's a beautiful lifestyle where your family lived on the farm. You come home for lunch and you see everyone, and so you've got to be very careful criticising. But the facts are, I've just saw the latest report on the nitrates in the water, and I thought it was 10 years away. And it's I've seen studies, and I think it was from Northern Europe, I can't remember if it's Norway or Sweden, about the level of nitrates we say are safe aren't.
Yeah.
They cause babies to go blue, they cause bowel cancer.
Yeah. I only just heard about blue baby syndrome recently. Yeah, I didn't know about it.
What is blue baby syndrome?
But the nitrates, I'm not a scientist, but if they get too many nitrates in their system, it affects the chemical balance in their body, and so they actually start to look blue, and it's really serious. It can lead to serious
baby smurf.
Baby Smurf. But so you got to
Thanks,
rush.
Taylor.
You got to rush your kids to the doctor.
Damn,
and
it's serious.
But I don't know if it's happening much. But the thing is, it's been ignored, and it's only going to get worse. And unfortunately, the people who are pushing back are the ones most affected, because it's a rural community that's going to affect the most, And like I said, I've grown up on farms, worked on farms. I know how hard it is when you're exhausted, and it's really hard not to lose your temper with the animals and all that sort of thing. And it's I enjoyed it for a small amount of time. For some people, it's 40 years, 50 years, 60, and with the generations, 60, 70, passing it through. But so we've got to be very careful. But the facts are, we've got to change. We can't keep poisoning our waterway. And I was actually thinking of asking you about that tonight, was because you know about the ocean environment quite a lot by the sounds of it. So what happens, the land becomes poison. I'm presuming the ocean starts having blooms, and the oxygen levels change. Is that right?
Yeah, that's very correct, and happening every summer now.
And we're getting more sea lice and stuff now, I've noticed.
Yes, I've noticed that on both the West Coast and the East Coast.
Yeah, but I've had adult jellyfish. I surf, in the West Coast we used to get a problem with that sometimes. But now it's just, things are changing, and it's only anecdotal. I'm not a scientist, but it just seems...
but there is scientific evidence to support that as well.
Oh, that's why I asked you. Yeah, and so we need to step up but stop casting slurs upon farmers, and farmers need to just chill out a bit as well themselves, and think, wow, this is actually happening.
But then it connects to the problem that I mentioned before. It's driving the economy of the country in a way, right?
Yes, so there is good
Here we
stuff
go.
happening.
Yeah.
I need to put
Good.
some
Yeah,
positive
positive.
light on
I like
this.
that. That's
Please.
what I want to hear. Yes.
Yeah. So when I was in Taranaki, I was really well connected in the environmental community, and there was a lot of overlap between, like farmers and a lot of. I keep hearing recently, like I've had 3 people recently tell me, like, all Kiwis are conservationists, and I'm like, okay. Like, in what way? I would love to have drawn that conversation out a little bit more, but every now and then I'd be like, yeah. Okay, maybe in some ways, like some definitions within conservationism.
Yeah.
But anyway, there are conservation farmers who put aside bushes, parts of their land for QE2 covenants, for they understand that significant natural areas, which are mapped under council for protection. The regulations are still in the process, but there are certain things. Some of them give them to forest and bird, for instance, and they're like, here, please protect this for us because we want our grandchildren to enjoy the nature.
So they're still working on the significant natural areas, are they?
Yeah,
'Cause
so
that was introduced in the 90s under the Jim Bolger government, wasn't it?
Oh, I'm not sure about that far back.
Yeah.
I was still
Little. And I'm getting older. Here we go. I was just reminded.
Yeah, significant natural areas, from what I understand now, are areas of Indigenous biodiversity that councils are required to protect. But there's a gap at the moment where they haven't introduced the rules of enforcement. So if someone clears it, it's a little bit of a muddy area at the moment.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's just an example of how people are actively wanting to and trying to protect what's left. But in terms of like farmers and landowners and things like that, there are people who are exploring different ways of farming, for instance, regenerative farming. There are farms in Taranaki that I'm aware of, and it's probably happening in other areas. Definitely the South Island. There's a few people that I've heard speak about their farms in the South Island that practice regenerative farming. So what it entails is reducing your stock load and sort of mimicking the way that browsing animals would naturally behave in the wild. So they would rotate their stock through the paddocks and allow them to sort of only eat so much of the grass.
So less chemical fertilizers.
Exactly. And so it naturally regenerates itself, and you don't have to add fertilizers because what is left helps it sort of sustain itself, and then it introduces more bugs and more biodiversity in that environment. And it just creates its little ecosystem, and it helps improve waterways by reducing nitrates going into the waterways, leaching and all that sort of stuff. The other cool thing that I learned about regenerative farming is that because the cows or stock is not eating the whole thing right down to the ground, whatever they nip at the top, it kills the roots underneath the soil, and that creates carbon capture and sort of keeps the soil alive underneath, because the microbes then eat the decaying root system under the soil, and it's just this whole self-regulating ecosystem. So there are ways that there is a possible future around this. But I think with anything that introduces big change from, say, tradition, the traditional way of doing things, people are going to be skeptical and afraid to try new things.
And as you get older, it gets more difficult. Change gets more difficult. You can just see it with everyone as they get older. Changing jobs, they get all fearful, and changing approaches to living.
That's a scientific thing as well, because as you get older, your brain, if you're not exposing yourself to new experiences all the time, your brain becomes more plastic. So your travelling is actually really good for your brain.
What saved me?
Elvisa, so she's coming to visit you.
We love to drink.
We love the optimistic and the positive side of things, but like I gotta ask this, for someone who is so involved with nature and the ecosystem, what do you fear the most? What do you think that, like, in your list of priorities, like if you were someone with a lot of power and like people were actually, cool, let's listen to Elvisa, she's got something going on there, let's follow her list of priorities, what would you tackle first? Tricky one.
That's
eh?
a huge question.
I know. Some things like it doesn't have to be one thing, but like things that concern you a little bit of like, I don't know how much time we have to actually get this right.
Definitely climate change. I saw something on social media which is based on a scientific report that shows that our generations after us are going to endure much warmer environments and much more extreme weather events than, say, previous generations. And no one can really deny that, especially now in New Zealand. We've been so sort of insulated because we're actually on a really climate resilient sort of part of the world where we're not like right on the equator where it's like really hot, and we're not obviously in Antarctica, so we're subtropical technically, but then the South Island is a little bit cooler. But my point around that is that climate change is going to affect every aspect of our survival, like our way of living, our way of building, our job economy, like job markets, what opportunities there are going to be. I did a workshop at one of my union hui's, and we explored this, like how is climate change going to affect the workplace? And when at the time I was working at Department of Conservation, and we did most people do a lot of field work. And if the environment's like, it's going to get real hot, and they're going to have to look at their uniforms, they're going to have to look at health and safety, they're going to have to, they've already started introducing more electric vehicles to reduce their carbon emissions, which makes sense. But then obviously there's the issue of the creation of those technologies of lithium mining. So it's kind of just like this really complicated, like, what do we do?
And also the transition is complicated because the industries that are run by oil, they have so much money invested there. So they want to slow down that process, right?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I have talked to people in the oil industry who feel that there is I mean it was part of my job.
Part of the job.
I had to be open enough to
absolutely
you have to hear their story. You have to hear their story.
So there are people who have sort of not let slip but sort of hinted that there are, like, some of the oil and gas companies have electric vehicle charging stations for their fleets. They have electric vehicles as part of their things, so that, excuse me, that beer is coming back.
Bring more beer. Bring more beer.
I mean, there's lots of good stuff happening, and I try really hard to put things into perspective and be like, okay, they're trying this bit, this much. They could do a lot more. And then there's like people's livelihoods. We don't have a universal basic income yet for people who are going to lose their jobs and going to need to retrain, in a new area. We don't have a just transition sort of system in place. We do a lot of talking. What is it? Less hui, more doy.
Is meritocracy the problem that gets in the way when it comes to the conversation of a universal income?
As what? Sorry?
Meritocracy, like...
meritocracy. I have no idea. I haven't really looked into UBIs very much, but I always get questioned when I'm like, UBIs. They're like, where's that money going to come from? If people aren't paying taxes, where's that money going to come from? And I'm like, well, there's a lot of money sitting in areas that are not being taxed, for starters. So it's like...
the financial transaction tax, for instance, earns billions. 0.01% financial transaction tax would earn billions for every country in the world.
Can you explain that?
Every transaction with a bank is taxed 0.01%. So the normal person, it doesn't affect you too much, you don't really see it. But big companies, and especially this is why it doesn't happen at the moment, places like Wall Street that are doing multiple trades every second through AI, of course, is they earn large amounts of money. And so the 0.01, they complain about it, but it's not a big deal. They can afford it.
Yeah.
And then you've got money that you can pump back into society, because the big thing is it's important. That's why it sounds negative, but it's important to say it, that money, once you're starving, money doesn't help. There's no food to buy when your environment has collapsed. It's an insane situation we're in, where the world, the Western world especially, reached pretty much maximum production of things we need a long time ago. And that's why they introduced financialisation of the economy, because they were stagnant in the 70s. Everything was stagnant, and so they were into neoliberal politics come in, and of course it's before you're even born. And so, and people don't even understand that now because it's history. And you see both parties, this is why I have an issue with voting, because both parties support that same system. And you're not going to, it's probably insane to think that you're going to fix the problem using the same thing that caused the problem.
Yeah.
Which is a society we love, and tinkering around the edges won't fix it. But we're already seeing it. There's suffering in the world, and what happens is things get stopped by nature. You get a big flood, your industry stops anyway.
Yeah.
With the COVID lockdown, whether you agree with it or not, I saw pictures of a place that I spent a lot of time in Delhi, and you could actually see the sky. We go there
Because of the smog.
You can't see it.
Yeah.
The last time we were there, you can't see. 800 metres was visibility on a good day, and so things can change, but not through tinkering.
Yeah.
And that's and I like to be positive, but I worry about young people because they're looking at it and going, because they're intelligent, and they're going, well, this doesn't look like much hope to me. And so we do need to really think seriously about what we're doing, and it's just nobody's willing to do it because we live in a system where politicians basically are very venal people, it seems. I'm not saying, I've met politicians and they're really wonderful in their house when I talk to them, and they're really educational people to talk to, and they know a lot. But when you think about it, they're not willing to change to save people. It's a real simple thing. It's quite a serious issue. And but so maybe that's why I believe more in more radical. That's why I asked about people being more radical and changing things from the street, because in history. It's meandering here, but in history, most big changes come from the street.
So it's
women voting and all that sort of thing come from the street. Didn't come from politicians. Eventually do it and claim the glory, like even the nuclear-free thing. David Longy wonderfully did it, but he was pushed to it.
It's funny that you bring up from the street, because whenever people say, like, oh, what's that biggest issue? And I say climate change, and then immediately I've come up across like older people who are like, she's radicalized my grandchild who just needs to be a child, like let them be a child. And I'm like, but like they have access to social media and they're learning about the environment at school, whether it's growing food or
here we go, second time in a week. Hey, there we have the siren.
Is that a tsunami or a...
It's the fire brigade.
A fire brigade. I was like...
we would have been gone by now. You'd be sitting on your own.
I can swim now.
Listeners, we're all good. So that actually happened on Tuesday, and I didn't get to explain. So for the people who don't live in the Coromandel, we have a siren here for the fire brigades, and the same siren used to be a tsunami evacuation alert. And I remember when I first came to Whitianga, there was a very cool bartender who taught me a lot. Jerry passed away last year, very sad, but he was funny and beautiful. Like he looks like Ron Wood from Rolling Stones. And homosexual guy, like very funny. And then he came to me like all rough, and then he was like, when you listen to the siren, if it goes like it's okay. But if it goes you run
for the hills.
Run away from the noise.
So there you go, that was perfect timing to stop listening to the siren. Kids getting, we were talking about older people saying, don't do that to my children, don't
radicalize my child, they need to enjoy their childhood. And it's like, well, if you found out that you might not have a future, would you be able to enjoy your childhood? So what else are you going to do? You're going to try and change the system. You're going to connect with your peers and try and activate change. Anyway, so the whole Greta Thunberg situation, like amazing. One person. Although I do want to acknowledge that she was not really the first person. She was just the first one to get attention to the issue. She has now come out and said, we need to be listening to young Indigenous voices. First and foremost. Well, I would say first and foremost, because they've been wanting this for generations since colonization. We've lost connection with the land, and that's why we've lost prioritizing protecting it.
Maybe it's a problem we see ourselves as only a body. So this is your limit. So you're not. People talk about nature like it's something else.
That we separate from it.
Even people that care, they go, "Oh, we really need to help nature." Well, yeah, it's you.
Yeah, we are nature. We are
nature.
Animals. We're just you know, we're just as important as the rat.
and for anyone who's even watching now, just the positive thing though is like someone like you who's an activist and still quite young. You've had a young child, so you're optimistic. There is you can
have
make
to
a
be
change.
optimistic
you
if you
can
have
make
a
a
baby.
change. Yeah, you have to be, and it's really cool. I mentioned that earlier. We talked together about that, and it's like it's something I really like to. I always, even last time I talked to you guys, I always like to come back to the positive because I have. You know, I have some dark stuff in my mind, like anyone, but it's that can you don't want to let it overwhelm you, you know, because there is always possibilities. It's part of critical thinking.
Yeah.
You can tell me all the reasons why we can't do something, and I can tell you a whole lot more. A business friend of mine told me this. People come to him and say, "Oh, we can't do this, man, and we can't do that." He says, "Oh, I can give you 6 reasons why we can't do it, but I actually want you to tell me why we can, how we can." And so that's why I salute you. You know, you're actually doing something, you know?
Yeah, thanks. I mean,
and these guys, you know, paying out their own money to get conversations. That's why I'm willing to come on here, because it's not my best comfortable space, you know. I'm a chill out guy at home, you know. but I do it because it's important. And maybe there's more and more of us doing this. That's why it's cool to meet you. Yeah.
Thank you. It's really nice to meet you as well. Yeah. And it's really important to engage with people with different ideas, and even if they do have sort of like a focus on more the negative stuff, because that is you just get really passionate about ideas and concepts, and then you look further into them, and sometimes when you get too deep in something, it becomes really dark because you've lost connection with all the positive stuff that's going on. And I guess that's one of the benefits of my work that I've done, is that I see a lot of good stuff that's happening. I've engaged with young children who got their parents to vote for me. You know, they have power. That children are part of our society. They're our future. I think we underestimate, you know, their capacity to engage, to give us a sense of purpose. I did go through a phase where I was like, we're not having children. Like, there's no point in having a kid. You know, they've just got a shitty future to look forward to. And now I'm kind of like, now that I've made a child, I'm kind of like, oh, I've got to work harder than ever before now. Like, I have even more of a purpose to work hard towards a better future for them. Because if there is no, there's that saying, like, a community without youth is a community without a future. And that goes for society. If you're not giving us a reason to fight, then what's the point? So even if people choose not to have children, that's their decision. Like, all power to you. You know, your life is your life kind of thing. But I have worked with children, and they are super smart. And they, I had this is one of my favourite stories to tell. My husband will be rolling his eyes if he ever sees this. But we were walking along the Te Henui walkway in New Plymouth, which is just down the road where we used to live. And we're just walking along. There's like ducks on the stream, and on the other side of the stream from the walkway, there's like the backyards of all the properties of the houses that come down into the stream, and they're all beautiful gardens, and some of them are like native gardens, some of them are like exotic gardens, but they're just really nice to look at when you're walking past. And anyway, the 6-year-old or something, really young kid, was on a tricycle, like barely had their training wheels off, and they were like pointing over the other side of the stream and was like, I like that house. Its backyard has lots of biodiversity. And I was like, I looked back at my husband and I was like this. And he was just like, oh God. And then I was just like, that's incredible. Such a big word. And they knew exactly what they were saying. Biodiversity, lots of different living things in their backyard. That's essentially what we, try to teach young kids. And them remembering that word, I'm sure lots of older people didn't even know what that word is. These days, and I've heard it from parents, these days children are teaching their parents. And that's how it should be. It should be an exchange of knowledge, not a authoritarian sort of system.
That's how education is, of course.
Exactly.
You're right,
And it's transferal of knowledge between generations. So things like that, experiences like that, give me hope because
Elvisa, you mentioned listening to people that you disagree with, like in a way, not with these words, but like engaging with people who's got like different opinions and all this stuff. And what a hot topic, right? What a moment for New Zealand, who most of the world, a lot of people cannot even put on the map. And then you see New Zealand hitting the news for different reasons of like trying to shut down people, and then the media having an opinion and different media outlets having a different opinion. What's your take on that? Of you know, like, because I'll tell you, you told a cool story. I'll tell you a quick one as well. We when you mention climate change, there's a big thing for us, you know, like the magazine and everything that we do, like we try to bring people who can educate us and who have facts like scientists, like so valuable for our community. So we love listening from you guys because we learn. However, we also have amazing, very intelligent people who will have a different take on that. You know, who, I don't know if the word is like deniers or whatever, but like people who have a different perspective on things. And we've come across situations where high profile people like would say, you should not talk to those people. You should not give a platform. Be careful with who you're bringing in, who you're talking to. And Taylor and I, we have a thing of like, we want to talk to people. I don't see this as a platform who is promoting anyone. I'm bringing people to have conversations, you know, like, and if you're a good speaker and if you're speaking from your heart and it's true what you're saying, people will get that. And then you're promoting yourself, good on you. But if you're talking shit, I'll call you out, you know, like if it's in my capability of understanding your shit, you know, like, and then I got to trust the audience as well, which is a risky move, but I do. What's your take on that? On like having people who have ideas that can be detrimental to our community, but it's still, I feel like if we put them in the corner, and Taylor says that very well, that corner becomes stronger and bigger because you start to put up. Do you agree with that? Do you have a take on that?
Yeah, by putting them in their own little corner and isolating them, you're allowing them to create their own echo chamber and insulating that. And the more people reinforce their views, the less likely they are to be open to changing those views or being educated enough to follow the evidence.
Conditioning's a thing that I think a lot about. Conditioning's a hard thing to change. Just, I don't believe in shutting people down so much, but it doesn't matter how much you discuss things with some people, it'll do nothing. Yeah,
I mean, like,
but it'll touch someone.
Yeah. Oh, and I think it's definitely worth planting a seed of. But it can happen both ways.
Yeah.
So someone who might be real certain of climate change, that it's human, human motivated, accelerating it at least. You know, if you platform someone who says that climate change is real, but it's not because of humans, and then they start talking about all the evidence that they've gathered, then it's like that gives them a bit of an opening for someone in the audience that doesn't quite understand how climate change actually works. It gives them a little bit of a exposure to a different way of looking at things and sort of pursuing that. So that, I think that is a really tricky one. Personally, I try to engage people on a one-on-one, but it's really hard to control your audience. And so, I don't really have a solid.
It's just a good topic to talk about. I'm not asking you to like give me a yes or no.
Can you solve our problems for us?
Especially now, because it's in the last, say, 30 years or even less, there's been this radical change in information.
Oh yes, social media.
Part of this is that too, you know, and it's been so radical that I don't think you look at evolution. I know some people don't believe in that, but evolution. People develop a certain way, then all of a sudden, bang, overnight, it changes. And we're all of a sudden looking at screens. And we're living a virtual reality. And I know Buddhist teachers would tell you that we've always lived a virtual reality, and we live in a conditioned world, and there is no such thing as free will because people are conditioned. But I look at myself and how much I've changed. It's not a boast, I have. My views were much more conservative. I had no political ideology or even thoughts when I was younger. I just wanted to go surfing and party up. And then I met people in another country, young men who were political. And I met this guy that was a communist and didn't believe in God. And I had a religious upbringing, and we were told that in the 60s, 70s, that communism was evil, you know. But they were really nice. This guy was really nice, and he's 21 years old, at the same age as me, and he really knew all the stuff. And I'm going, oh my God, there's another world. So that for me, things changed. I shouldn't dismiss other people, I suppose, because anyone can change. But you just wonder sometimes. But yeah, people can change, I suppose. It's going through my head now as I say it.
Yeah,
Oh well, maybe they can, you know.
Definitely. I didn't do science in high school. I had no interest in biology or anything scientific. I was a creative. That's why with the artist thing, we haven't even started talking about that. But yeah, as a creative person, I excelled at like English, music. I played piano for 12 years growing up. So that's one of the privileges that my mum gave me because she never got that. So she was like, I'm going to invest in her music. You know.
Shout out to Mum.
Yeah. Love you, Mum. You're awesome.
Down that positive note, are you still playing?
Oh, yeah. Not at the moment, but I have been creating my own songs over the last few years. It's just with baby. It's like hard to make that time. But my husband plays guitar, and so we do want to bring him up in a musical environment and get him used to that because it's actually really good for your brain. Yeah. I mean, I'm going on a tangent. I can't even remember what we were talking about.
Here we go, music. Off we go.
We're all into music.
Yeah. Okay. Well, on that note, on that music. So I watched a documentary about old people's homes. No, sorry, it wasn't. No, it was like a dementia. Ward. And they introduced music in like with headphones to people who were deteriorating to a point where they were almost like non-responsive. And as soon as they started hearing songs from their era when they were younger, their brains lit up and they were like, you know, they were moving and their nerves were like stimulated, and it was like a core memory being stimulated kind of thing. And they found I don't know what the specific details are, but they found that the part of the brain that processes music, and you know, it's like I can sing Spice Girls songs and Britney Spears songs even though I haven't heard them for 2 decades. I, you know, can remember them. It's just that deeply, you know, wired in me. It's the same when you've got dementia or the other type of deteriorative conditions. They found that music really stimulates their memories and makes them come alive almost, you know. And so it's become a therapy for people who have brain conditions. Because
most young children seem to love music and dancing.
Yeah,
so maybe it's natural.
Yeah, like we were talking about earlier, I can't remember if we've recorded it or if we're off the record, but we were talking about how humans are like primarily visual learners. Like people say, I'm a visual learner. Well, most people are. Unless you're blind, then your other senses come out. It's the same with music. You know, before we learnt words, we learnt sound and pitch.
Oh, right,
You know, like there are communities in Africa that still use clicking as part of their way of communicating. So before we learnt, sorry, microphone. I'm trying to communicate with the microphone. Before we learnt how to speak a language, we experimented with sound and we communicated with whistles and clicks and really primal noises, you know.
That's a great skill for teachers. We were lucky to have Fabian, who was the co-host when you were here, Mr. Roberts. And he's fantastic with that. Like he's a music teacher, but even for other subjects, like he understands the importance of singing and making children repeat. You know, like memorize songs, and like even Stu, like when he's teaching the chords, and like he comes up with these sentences and then the children sing that and they will remember that because you always remember a little song or something, right? So for learning, it's just fantastic. You're right.
That's why ABCD. G, H, I, G. You know, they've all those
tiny children at 3 years old can do that, right? Yeah. And it's fun.
Yeah. Oh, and now you've got kids rapping really complex raps. I'm like, we are evolving.
I love the music and art topic, but I don't want to miss something before we change too much for the conservation. Can you tell us a little bit about the penguins? Because I love the t-shirt. Yes. And that was something that we chatted before we were doing this. And just give us a little bit of information. That's such a cool project. What is it?
Well, okay, so we were talking about climate change before, and what I sort of went off on a tangent about without sort of coming back to is that a species like penguins are are an indicator species. So because they nest on land and they feed out at sea, they can actually tell us what the potential conditions of the sea are, even just by monitoring them from land. Yeah. So there's a lot of science going on, not just by scientists but citizen scientists, and that's another thing that I want to drop, is that anyone can become a scientist. Children are natural scientists. I mean, Neil deGrasse Tyson always talks about it, like children are natural scientists. I can't do his voice. That was terrible.
Good try.
Yeah, thanks.
Honest attempt.
I mean, the way that kids are curious and want to learn and want to understand the world and understand how they should and can engage with it. That's why they like drop things from their high chairs, because they're potentially learning about gravity. And then when something floats, they're like, that's not normal, you know? So when it comes to penguins, people are like, oh, they're so cute, and like little blue penguins, they're so small and fluffy, and I mean, they bite and they've got a hooked beak. I don't recommend, it is illegal to actively go and pick one up. You should always just leave a penguin, just like any other wild animal, to its own devices. And if you do come across a sick penguin, always call 0800 DOC-HOT. And they will guide you on what to do next, if it needs help or not. Anyway, penguins are an indicator species, so they're really important with monitoring how the environment looks. For instance, if they're coming back starving and underweight, then we can potentially come to the conclusion that they're not finding enough food, or something is inhibiting their way of acquiring food. Maybe there is a disease outbreak. There's all these indicators that we can explore, or scientists can explore, because they have like ethical boundaries that they are aware of that they can work with. And then there's all these different ways to learn about penguins and how they impact other species, how other species impact them. Different species have different diets and different ways of looking for food, different habitats. We recently, in the last 10 years, I think, I don't know when, but we found out that there were way more tawaki than we initially thought, because we were only looking in one area.
The tawaki,
tawaki is the Fiordland crested penguin. So down in the fjords, there's these little colonies of penguins, and we didn't know that they were more spaced out, and so there were more little colonies. And depending on where they are within the fjord, they feed differently. Some of them go out of the fjord into the open ocean and feed. Some of them only feed within the Anyway, I learn all this stuff from penguin conferences. So I love going to penguin conferences, because I always learn something new, and there's always updated information on what the other scientists are learning about what they're investigating. And I just want to shout out to the Oamaru Penguin Symposium community, which I'll be going to in 2 weeks' time with my whānau, because I wanted to show my husband around Oamaru. But it's really cool being able to connect with people who I don't get to see for like 2 years between symposiums, and then you get together and you're like, oh, what's going on in your area? Like, how are your penguins?
I almost lost my finger last time I tried to grab a penguin. Oh, cool, me too.
And you always have like funny and cool and sometimes really intimidating stories to share. The New Zealand Geographic latest edition has a huge story on the subantarctic penguins, which Dr. Thomas Mattern and Jeff White and Gorge River, sorry, I've forgotten names, just kind of in that state. Anyway, awesome people, awesome scientists have gone down recently and monitored all these penguins on the subantarctic islands. And the great thing for me is that I went to the subantarctic islands at the start of last year with Heritage Expeditions on a scholarship. Cool. It was just a subsidised fee, so it wasn't as expensive. And got to meet all these other like really, really cool young people on that trip. But my cool thing was I didn't realise that rockhopper penguins were just a little bit bigger than little blue penguins. So it's really cool seeing them. It was really cool seeing them in real life. Same with hoiho, the yellow-eyed penguins. They're almost extinct from the mainland, but there is, I think, a healthy-ish population in the subantarctics. So different habitats, different environments impact their populations differently.
Yeah.
Now, the way I got involved in penguins was when I was studying marine science in Tauranga. I put my hand up to volunteer as a citizen scientist to catch penguins, so that the scientists could weigh them, record their weight, and it was actually a follow-up program from the Rena accident where there was that big oil spill.
Oh, terrible.
So they had a really cool community. The Western Bay Wildlife Trust invited volunteers to come and help them monitor the penguins because there were so many to catch and such a small period of time as well each year within a breeding season. But there are rules around that, and they have to have a permit, they have to have training. There's all these things to help protect the penguins and ourselves because humans and wild animals can transfer disease,
of course,
all that kind of stuff. So that's how I got into monitoring penguins.
Wow,
and I thought, at first I had my marine science background, and so I was like, oh cool, this will be great experience for my CV, and I'll meet like-minded people, I'll be able to touch a penguin. And so that was the beginning of my penguin journey. But now I moved towards, when I moved to Taranaki, I started helping the Marine Reserve Society over there expand their penguin education program. So we got funding to run Finding Little Blue, which was a citizen science project working with schools, parents, the wider community to raise awareness, that we have penguins, and that's why you're not allowed dogs on certain beaches. Because a lot of people in the public think that, you're not allowed dogs there because people will complain. But actually it's a lot of the time it's to protect the wildlife, that you may not see during the day because they come out at night to feed and stuff.
The dogs find them,
Yes, exactly. And then you find one morning there was a big story. There were like 4 little blue penguins dead on the boat ramp, in New Plymouth, and it was from one dog.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And so that dog had been there, it just happened to be there during the time where penguins were either coming in or going out. And that raised awareness of why you're not allowed dogs on certain areas. But not everyone gets that message because they're not exposed.
We love our dogs.
And we love our dogs. I love my dog, but I put him through Kiwi aversion training because we live near a Kiwi area, So raising awareness and educating people, and the citizen science element brings the community to create a sense of kaitiakitanga, they have a responsibility to protect these penguins, so we're going to work together and actively do that. And now I'm up here, there's I'm not aware of any penguin monitoring groups. So I'm really keen, if anyone in the Coromandel is interested in monitoring penguins and collecting data that we can compare to other parts of the country around little blue penguins, please get in touch with me.
There you
I'd
go.
really love that.
Yeah, cool.
Because I'd be really keen to get that off the ground. Especially you've spoken to Anameka, the Kuatunu penguin rehabilitator.
Is she retired now?
She's just retired.
Yeah, a lot of work. Yeah.
Oh, and
she's
it's
still
getting
involved,
more.
but
retired. Yeah. Oh, she loves the creatures.
Yes,
Yeah.
And there's more threats to them, particularly climate change. And overfishing, but climate change is really impacting their survival, especially the young ones going out and learning how to fish.
Oh, right.
And the fish or the food sources that you'd normally find within the shore of a certain distance are moving further out because it's getting too warm.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just one example of how climate change is affecting biodiversity.
So they're at risk because they're too far out to sea. They get exhausted and
and that's just one element. There's a lot more.
Oh yeah.
There are scientists who are excuse me. There are scientists who are getting little samples of their feathers and trying to figure out what their diet is based through their feathers. Science is so particular in different areas with different scientists. So it's really a fascinating area.
Oh wow, cool.
Yeah.
Elvisa, we cover so many cool topics, and I feel like we could do a couple of shows together. So you will definitely be invited to come back.
Oh, thanks.
But before we wrap it up, I just want to touch on something that I noticed when we met, and maybe you can give me a little bit about your involvement with Maori culture. You use the words. You pronounce them right, like it feels like you are, because it's something
it's
like
a big
for
thing
me, for me at school, You know, it's something that it's we talk about a lot. You know, we had so many guests coming in talking about that. Oh, everyone knows the importance of it, but like not many people know how to engage or how to do it. So for someone who is not from New Zealand and has this appreciation and this dedication, like how is the journey for you, and what's the involvement with Maori culture?
It's quite complex in itself. So I'm Filipino-Irish, but my mum's from the Philippines, and I grew up in a town called Tokoroa, but I grew up pronouncing it Tokoroa, which sounds more beautiful and culturally appropriate, you know, Tokoroa. But I grew up in Tokoroa. A lot of my friends who grew up there who are not Māori themselves, Pākehā, Pacific Island, they now pronounce it Tokoroa because we as a country are starting to learn the importance of pronouncing words correctly. And so that has some of why I pronounce words correctly from where I grew up. I was born in Auckland, raised in Tokoroa. My mum's from the Philippines, but she did a te reo like entrance class through Te Wānanga after my little brother went to school. She was like, oh, I need to upskill and like figure out what to do next with my career.
Cool.
So she did a course, and she was so cute. She'd come home and she'd be like, because she's a little, you know, sort of dark-skinned Filipino, beautiful dark-skinned Filipino woman, and she'd come home and she'd be like, oh, such and such, who I just met thought that I was a little Māori lady. And she was like, kia ora. And she works in a kindergarten now as well. So, you know, kindergartens try to encourage te reo as well, like learning the colours and the numbers in te reo. So that really fostered her, like, it became natural, I guess. And my biological dad and my stepdad are both Pākehā, but they don't have an issue with the way I pronounce things. The other thing is that because my mum's from the Philippines and they roll their R's like Māori, I had the privilege of growing up around a language that rolls their R's. And so like one of my favourite things to say is pupunta ko sa trabaho in Tagalog. And I don't speak much Tagalog. That's just the one sentence that I love saying because it sounds so exotic, and trabajo is a Spanish word, and so it got me thinking about like the history of the Philippines and colonization from Spain and stuff. So learning about Māori culture and the importance of whakapapa got me thinking about where do I come from? What is my identity? What is my history and heritage? And my mum doesn't know much about hers, but what I can do is I can look at the history of the Philippines and connect the dots on how colonization and the history of the Philippines has affected my mum's identity and my mum's whānau, and, you know, sort of trying to place where do I belong in this Māori, you know, this society where Māoridom is becoming more and more important. It's always been important, but I mean in terms of like the shift where people are starting to realise the significance of te tiriti o Waitangi, you know. It's not just a document. There's a reason why they had treaties, you know. There are academics who really push for the importance of understanding why te tiriti o Waitangi is really important. New Zealand, Aotearoa New Zealand is one of the leading countries in the world that honours te tiriti and allows that space for Māoridom to figure out what their tino rangatiratanga is, their sovereignty. So I was very lucky as well to have a New Zealand historian, a published New Zealand historian, Dr. Trevor Bentley, as my history teacher.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh. Wow.
Yeah. So I was lucky that I had that education, I had that culture and community that fostered. We had a marae on our school grounds, Tokoroa High School. Shout out Tokoroa High. We had a marae, and it was just so normal for us to welcome the year 9s on every year, all the new students. We'd have a porphyry at the start of every year. It was normal for us. And then I went to Victoria University where people from all sorts of different schools came together. And it was so different. I was like, oh, you don't do porphyry for your thing? You know, back in 2009, sorry, was my first year of uni. I just realised that, wow, I'm really lucky that I got this experience in school where we had te reo. Everyone did te reo in year 9 kind of thing. So we
really
always
nice.
had, we had haka every Every ceremony, not every assembly, but every end of year, like prize giving, there were at least 3 haka that were performed to honour the recipients.
Yeah.
It was just so normal for us.
Quite a privilege, but it was normal for you.
Different times, Mark?
Oh, yeah. But when I was young, there was nothing.
Yeah.
There was nothing in the school I went to. And when I look back, for the few children that were from Maori families, must have been real difficult.
Yeah.
Because they were sort of almost ignored. They were outcast, really. It was. I remember the family, and I remember these boys attacking me and my mate one day, and it didn't go far because only little kids. But when I look back, I thought those guys must have felt sort of outcast, so outcast that they had to act out this thing because they weren't bad kids, but they were the only ones.
Yeah.
And there's no te reo. There was nothing, And I suppose there's always been activists and there's always been people pushing the language, but I imagine, I call it the Renaissance sort of happened in my life, and started in the, I think of, I've got a brother and sister who went to Australia and must have been in the late 70s, early 80s, and they don't really know a lot of that. They're learning about it a bit now, my sister is, but it's, they missed all that, and I was lucky enough to witness it, but it was, that's why it's disappointing that people still push back. Because for me, just intellectually, from an intellectual point of view, it's so good for your mind to learn another language, and it doesn't have to be about earning money. People go, you're better off learning Mandarin or whatever, But it's not about that. It's about your mind, helping your mind, and to understand other people. Because I don't think, from my exposure to other cultures, I don't think you fully understand a culture until you can speak the language. Because there's always a little gap in understanding. Slowly. In India, I learn a little bit more every time I go, real slowly. I struggle with language, and it's but you start to hear words, and you start to understand the people better. That's for sure. And if it's the people of your own country, well, wouldn't it be nice? We wouldn't have children feeling alienated,
Yeah.
because they would feel part of it.
Because people cannot pronounce their names.
Yeah.
Or even try. And people say, I was saying to someone the other day, I was spent my from 3 till 17, I suppose. I lived in Karaka. That's what I called it. It's not Karaka.
Karaka.
Yeah, and someone said, we still call it that. I was talking to this person, I said, I didn't argue. I thought I just let it go. But I thought just be a little bit gracious, someone has a name pronounced a certain way. Their mother called them this name, and have respect for it. And I've luckily had friends like Roy Matra and people who can make fun of my accent in a really nice way, just to teach me. He used to always joke because he can do my accent. Roy Mata's a really talented, Roy Mata? He's a really good musician, talented guy, and he can do accents really well. And he'd throw my accent back at me. Oh, pedo, you're going to pedo. He could do it really well, and it's sort of, oh, yeah, that's right, it does sound like that. Yeah.
So, just on that, because I love saying that, punta cosa trabajo. I said to my husband one day, I was like, imagine if I said that without within my Kiwi accent. Papunta cosa trabajo. Yeah. You do it well, yeah. You've got that same talent as Roy, actually. Yeah, you can do it. Yeah, you can do both. Yeah. And I do notice places like Gisborne on those lines, there's so many people have almost a different, even Pākehā people down there have a different accent, because you've spent there, and it's almost like a slightly different dialect, even though they're speaking English. And you think, oh, wow, it's because there's a large population of people who know how to pronounce things, or it's not even know, they just always have. Yeah.
Even if they don't speak a lot of te reo, because not many people are that fluid and fluent, and or fluid, but it's really nice to hear the round language and just the people just acknowledging your fellow human. That's what it is.
I have a story that sort of circles back to your question about the being part of that old boys club or whatever, being exposed to that environment. Anyway, we as councillors had a cultural workshop that a local mana whenua came in and sort of taught us real basics, including like karakia is not always a prayer. Sometimes it's just an acknowledgement to the elements and to, when you perform a karakia, say for food, what you're essentially doing is you may want to apply like a religious element to it, but for for the general sort of idea of it is acknowledging where the food comes from and the effort, time and resources that went into the nature of growing food. And so essentially you're saying, thanks nature for nourishing me, for giving me energy. And exactly. That's not for everybody, but that's the sort of underlying principle of a lot of karakia. With and I just want to accentuate that's not for everybody. Every Māori community has different perspectives. Anyway, my point to that story was that one of our councillors, who is an older Pākehā male and is a farmer, he was so sweet. He went to that workshop and we all got asked, why are you here at this workshop? What do you want to get out of it? And his story was that he spent a couple of years in Thailand for work, went over there and he was like immersed in the culture and like really appreciated the differences in culture and the richness of it. And then he realized that we've lost that in New Zealand. Like what makes New Zealand, what makes Aotearoa New Zealand unique culturally and stuff. And then he realized, I have this appreciation for a culture in a different country that I didn't grow up in, not realizing the importance of honoring the culture of the land that I live on, you know, and allowing space and voice and power for the people who were there first, pretty much. So that was his story, and I was like,
that's really nice.
There is hope.
There's hope.
There's hope.
It's a good thing. It's good to hear more hope. It's because we've got to have hope.
And a couple of the older Pākehā men who worked at the council or were councillors, they'd come up to me and they'd say, I'm doing courses in te reo, and I'd be like, ka pai tō mahi.
Because it's quite it's challenging. You know, it's quite sort of almost frightening, you know, like to step out. And because it's embarrassing to make a fool of yourself. And in certain circles, people do give you a hard time, but less and less. I think people do have a joke, and it's nice. You know, you're trying your best, and it's like him. You know, when I travel, just trying, people love, and you end up having such a laugh when you get things wrong. You know, and you actually learn from the laughs.
You laugh.
You said the wrong word, and I imagine Portuguese, because that's quite a difficult language too. But if someone from New Zealand's trying to speak, you'd have a lot of laugh, because you can embarrass yourself. In Thailand, I very rarely use any Thai words because they can mean totally different things, you know. like it can be really embarrassing. But you know, maybe you should try harder. You know, say thank you and things like that. But it's like, but it is a bit. As you get older too, your brain gets less elastic, of course. But it's because children can always pick up language.
They're like sponges, man. Yeah.
So you're teaching your child. Your child going to learn bilingual.
We've been bringing him to
maybe trilingual. Filipino.
So that's a challenge for me. I'd love to learn te reo and Tagalog. I'm still trying to look for avenues to learn Tagalog. I've tried with my mum, but it's really hard to stick. The older you get, the harder it is to retain something if you're not using it all the time.
Of course.
So there are certain words and phrases that I use with my mum, and she gets really excited when I do use them, but it's very easy to sort of drop it, but you know, without getting distracted with life. But te reo, because it's everywhere, and my son it's so cool saying my son. I have a son. I made a human. You know, his heritage is Māori, and a bunch of other stuff. But because he lives in Aotearoa, New Zealand, I would like for him to learn the language of the land that he comes from. And he has family members in Rotorua who speak fluent te reo, so it'd be really cool for him to learn with them, with his whānau. So me, my husband, my mother-in-law, we're all on this journey together, and that's what this intergenerational living is really cool for as well, is that we're all learning together.
Nice.
Congratulations on that mission. That's amazing.
Oh, thanks.
It inspires people. That's cool. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks. It's in terms of the intergenerational living, going back to climate change and stuff, there is a movement called degrowth, and Dr. Joyce Sorry, Mike. He recently did a talk on the concept of degrowth and what that encompasses. And there's a group on Facebook called Degrowth Aotearoa, and that is one of the many ways that people are trying to take action on climate change and sort of make a shift in this world of capitalism.
I actually think it's the only way.
Yeah,
People are trying to maintain the same lifestyle, and everyone, even people from the Green Party are doing it. They're trying to say, oh, yeah, we can maintain our lifestyle. No, we can't. No. We can't keep consuming. Yeah. We can't just keep consuming and consuming and consuming. And it's so it's cool to almost look that up. Yeah, thanks.
Definitely look it up. The Facebook page is great. There's some real dark stuff. A lot of scientific and social science that's posted in that group. That it's a really good learning thing. Yeah. Sometimes there's people with a sense of humour who should post memes and stuff like that. Yeah. So it's a really really diverse group of people from different backgrounds: economics, finance, farming, conservation. Really diverse people who are really keen to learn more about how can we change the way that we're living. And like in my line of work in conservation, I'm constantly making submissions on the changing environment with expanding cities. So we're growing out because resource consent allows us to. But we're very quickly learning that might not be necessarily the most sustainable way to foster our communities.
Especially when we get a flood because the wetlands filled up with buildings.
Right, exactly, things like that. And we're very quickly learning why we need to change the way that we are growing or, move towards degrowth. But an example of that is that we want more funding to public transport, more biking, walking, cycling to reduce our emissions, reliance on oil and gas and things
local
like
markets,
that.
Things like that.
But the only way to do that is to build up. And a lot of people who are used to a lifestyle of being able to see things, like look out the window and be like, here's my beautiful large backyard and garden and stuff like that. You can have gardens. There are places in other countries where you can rent allotments to grow your own food, thing, or you can grow in different ways. And it's just this, like you said, changing your mindset about how can we live
and
better.
I realise it's difficult because you get addicted to your toys.
Oh, totally.
In your garden, in your backyard. But if we don't do it, it will be forced on us.
Yeah.
That's right.
It will happen.
And it will be painful.
So let's do it the easy way.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, there's, again, it's another example of a different community trying new things and really trying to spread the word that we can do this. We can move away from relying on really environmentally detrimental ways of doing things.
We really appreciate having you on the show, in the community, because that's our mission. That's what we're doing with this project. We want to find like-minded people, and even if they're not like-minded but they're willing to listen, there's an opportunity
or tell us something.
Because more hands, as we all know, make lighter work.
Exactly.
So thank you so much, Elvisa, for joining us. As I said, we'll definitely bring you back. We got ideas, right? We were brewing cool ideas.
And then the idea of a women's group.
We got ideas, man.
There's
cool
good.
things.
I bet you were thinking about it already.
Cool things coming up. And there's just you talk so much about the youth and how we got to get them involved, and that's part of my mission. It just came to me. I've been doing this for so long, and then you click, you're like, that's it, I'm already doing it.
You've got quite a good connection.
You just gotta focus and choose what you're gonna do with that avenue, so we really appreciate having you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for letting us
nice
talk
to meet
about
you.
So many different things.
It was good.
They all tie in, you know. You can always bring it back around.
That's what we're doing. And Mr. Mark, it goes without saying, always a pleasure.
Always good.
A privilege, I would say.
To you, Taylor, as well. Cool, brother.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Oh, dude, what a deep voice,
Very smooth.
He saved it for the end. Thanks, team. It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.
And we're back on Tuesday with another amazing podcast at 7 p.m. So be with us. Oh, by the way, Corrosive Moses, awesome punk rock trio from Whitianga, which I play the drums for. playing tomorrow at the Monkey Theatre with an awesome band called East York. They are opening for Devil's Skin. They're doing a cool tour with Devil's Skin, and we're going to play together tomorrow at the Monkey House Theatre. So if you want to do some headbanging.
And the time?
7 p.m. starts with Yo-Yo, local band, and then we play around 8-ish, and then 9 p.m. I would say. Well, the third band is going to be fun. It's going to go crazy, so I might see you tomorrow. Otherwise, I'll see you on Tuesday at 7 p.m. Peace.